I should have been at school, but I was on shoots with David Bailey and all sorts of really interesting people. So it was a great education in an unexpected way. I think where I've been lucky is that I've managed to make my living from all the things that I really get excited about. So I've always loved fashion. I've always loved food. I've loved food for longer than I've loved fashion, and I've always loved photography. When I looked at an image, I wanted to know who took it, who styled it, who did the hair and makeup. And I had this kind of understanding and awareness of photography. Now, looking back on it, that I ended up being a model agent, but I had no intention of being one. I left home when I was 17. My father read my diary, found out things about my personal life that he was not happy with. So my parents were both born in Guyana, formerly British Guyana, and moved here in the 50s. I think food's all you've got when you're a migrant, actually, and it's the only thing that takes you back home. The only thing that I was ever good at was cooking. So I would watch my mother cook and all of my aunts and all of their friends. Carrying on those recipes and developing those recipes was a way of getting to know my family.
Hello, everybody. Today we're joined by someone whose journey moves as effortlessly between glamour, grit, and gourmet as any of the railway routes he's conquered. He began his career in the high-stakes world of fashion, representing some of the biggest names on the runway. He's weathered heart-shattering tragedy and emerged with a renewed purpose. And today he blends his love of food, travel, and culture in dazzling form as the author of the Pepperpot Club and the host of Gourmet Trains. From a childhood in London to stewarding model talent and then curating culinary expeditions across the world's great railways. Jonathan Phang, welcome to the Tamp Podcast.
Lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So yeah, as I was telling you earlier, when I was doing my prep, because we didn't know each other before this, then I did my research. I'm like, wow, there is so much. You lived a lot.
Well, I'm old now, so I've packed a lot in. So, I think it'd be quite boring if I hadn't at my age. But yes,
But
it has been interesting.
many people can get old without living a lot.
True.
In one sentence, how would you describe your journey from fashion and agency to food and travel?
I think where I've been lucky is that I've managed to make my living from all the things that I really get excited about. So I've always loved fashion. I've always loved food. I've loved food for longer than I've loved fashion, and I've always loved photography. And all of those things are the things that I pay my rent with. And so I'm lucky that I've turned my passions into my livelihood. But I don't think I'd have been capable of doing anything else. So I think for me, I always have to love what I'm doing quite a lot in order to do it. I've never been a person that can just sort of coast it on something that I find bland.
The flip side to that is some people are scared of doing what they love for the fear of kind of falling out of love with it.
Right.
Because that is also a reality as well.
I think, well, to be honest with you, I didn't orchestrate any of it. Everything just kind of fell into place without me consciously knowing it. So now I look back on it, and of course, all the people I socialized with, everything that I, cared about when I was a teenager was all about fashion. I used to sit there devouring magazines, and I kind of, by osmosis, knew exactly who everybody was. Because in those days, remember this, I was a teenager in the early 80s, and there was no means of communication. We couldn't research things in the way that we can now. So I had magazines, and I was just really interested in who those people were. When I looked at an image, I wanted to know who took it, who styled it, who did the hair and makeup. And I had this kind of understanding and awareness of photography and all the elements of it. And so it was kind of natural now, looking back on it, that I ended up being a model agent, but I had no intention of being one. I left home when I was 17. My father read my diary, found out things about my personal life that he was not happy with. And so I felt it was best to get out of home as quickly as possible. And then at that point, I kind of knew, I don't know, it was really easy to meet people in the early 80s. I think now people are slaves to telephones and to dating apps and all of this. But in those days, you would just go out and sort of meet people. And I think like meets like, and I met people that actually I'm going to tell you the story. So when I was 16, I used to street interview for an insurance company called Acorn Growth. So I was one of those annoying people down the King's Road on a Saturday saying hello, and annoying everybody. And I loved the King's Road because it was full of life and it was full of diversity and very colourful. But there were also two gay bars there, and I was jailbait because the age of consent then was 21. So I was quite shy being in that environment, but I kind of wanted to, to view it as an outsider, and was too shy to indulge in it. So there was a bar on the King's Road called the Markham Arms, which is now a building society. And outside there was a girl selling balloons. And I became very friendly with her. And she was Emma Chambers, who was in The Vicar of Dibley.
Ah, yes.
And her sister was Sarah Dukas, who owned Storm Agency
Okay.
and who ran an agency called Lorraine Ashton at the time. And we were chatting about things. And I told her how much I loved fashion and models and all of those things. And she said, "You must meet my sister." And that's partly how I became involved in the industry.
But that's how it worked back then. It was the only way.
It was the only way.
Because as you said, we didn't have apps, we didn't have LinkedIn, we didn't have the internet.
Yeah.
If you did not put yourself in the middle or surround
Mhm.
yourself with the people you wanted to be close to,
Yeah.
you wouldn't get close to them.
Absolutely. See, now I'm feeling a bit all nostalgic. And then I met a makeup artist called Paul Goebel, who was a massive star in those days. He was originally from Cuba, but lived in New York. And he then came to London and he had about 54 covers of Vogue in his portfolio. And he lived in a squat on Beaufort Street off the King's Road. We became very friendly. And so I used to bunk school and basically go and paint a toenail while he went off and did whatever he did. And so that was a huge intro into the business as well. And so literally, I should have been at school, but I was on shoots with David Bailey and all sorts of really interesting people. So it was a great education in an unexpected way.
What would you say has been the most unexpected highlight of your journey?
Okay. Highlight. Oh gosh, I don't know. There's quite a lot of them actually, because I'm an uneducated person from Hounslow. And so anything good has been a really interesting highlight that I had no idea would happen. So um I am I do sort of pinch myself and think, how did I end up working with the people I worked with? I will always have imposter syndrome as a result of it. And I don't know. Hopefully, there are highlights to come, but I never thought I would do any of the things that I did. I don't think I've always been very good at any of them. I think, I've had opportunities. Sometimes I've wasted them.
I think we've all done that.
Yes. Yeah. I hope there are more to come. Um, but okay. I mean, I really don't know. I think working with Jerry Hall was actually a really, really great high point for me. I think some of the cookery shows I did, I did a really lovely 10-part show in the Caribbean, which meant a lot to me. I wasn't thrilled with the results. I wasn't thrilled with myself. But getting it was a high point. I think it's always about the thrill of the chase in life.
Were you just being overly critical?
No, not at all. I think with television, sometimes the stars align and sometimes they don't. And it does, I've just done a really nice show in Greece where everyone was fantastic. I felt really relaxed and really secure. And I know it's probably the best thing I've done. And I can't fault myself at all, which is very rare for me. And I think, it's sometimes you're not ready for opportunities.
Yeah.
And sometimes the team just doesn't gel. And it's also to do with the lack of confidence and sometimes trying too hard. But I think, life is an ongoing sort of work in progress. And I think it's good to acknowledge when you've been good and when you've been bad and to try and strive to be better. But I've had an enormous amount of high points and all of it has been unexpected. And yeah, but also now, I take a lot of photographs. That's a massive part of my career, which I never thought was going to be on the cards at all. And that has been really rewarding in ways that I didn't expect because I love being in control of it. I love the fact that when I'm taking pictures professionally, it's down to me if they're good or if they're bad. And I like being solely responsible for it. It's sometimes nice not to rely on a team.
You say that, but with art, I don't think it's that simple as you say it's down to you whether they're good or they're bad. But art is so subjective
Sure.
that you can have something which you believe is good and no one will be interested in it. And you can have the opposite, where you can do something where you go, oh, this, I didn't do this, this is rubbish.
Yeah.
And suddenly it takes off.
I think
It's a bit funny like that.
I don't consider myself as an artist with photography at all. I think that I'm amazed I make money out of it at all because I can't really use a camera very well. But what I can do is get a good reaction out of people, and not everybody can do that. And I think that as long as there is a basic standard where everybody looks as good as they can look, then you've kind of won with the photography that I do, because I take pictures at parties and events. So it's not sort of, so I would never accuse myself of being remotely autistic at all. It's sort of point and shoot. But I do find it really disappointing if someone doesn't like the results. But I'm very, I do feel good about myself when someone feels flattered.
Of course.
Yeah.
Your Chinese, Guyanese
Mm,
heritage
yeah.
grew up here in London. You said Hounslow, which I
Yes.
didn't know that bit. Um, what dish or aroma takes you right back to your
Okay.
childhood?
So my parents were both born in Guyana, formerly British Guyana, and moved here in the 50s. My mother was sent here because my grandparents didn't like her going out with my father because it was quite a snobby society. It was a
Mm.
British colony. My father was three-quarters Chinese and a quarter Indian. My mother was all sorts of things. And so she literally was sent here at 18. She didn't know she was coming. And um, I think food's all you've got when you're a migrant, actually, and it's the only thing that takes you back home. And so for me, that has continued because we grew up with Chinese and Guyanese food in my house. It was really difficult growing up in the 70s with mixed race parents because particularly as my father looked Chinese but spoke with a really raw Guyanese accent. My mother looked sort of Latino, and I never understood where I was from because I hadn't been there. And then we had this extraordinary food. So I went to school in Chiswick, so people would come back to my house and think, "What's going on?" Half of them look Chinese and sound like they're from Jamaica, and the rest of them, I don't know where they're from, and the food is really unrecognizable. But the national dish of Guyana is called Pepperpot, which is quite an extraordinary dish.
Ah, that's where the name of the book.
Yeah, and when I look at it and smell it, I'm in the bosom of the family, back in Hounslow or Isleworth, as my mother would say, because she thought it sounded classier than Hounslow. And it evokes really tender memories of family. And now I don't have any. I have a brother left, but no one else is left in the family. I still cook it on Christmas Day because it's traditionally eaten at Christmas, although it's a mixed meat
I was going to say,
stew.
can you tell us what the dish is?
Okay, so it's an Amerindian dish because oh God, what's the word I'm looking for? The indigenous population of Guyana are actually Amerindians, and it's made from a pulp from cassava,
Yeah.
and it's a natural meat preservative, and it's jet black and very bitter. So you sweeten it and add herbs and spices to it, well, cinnamon and cloves and lots of hot pepper and thyme, and you basically boil meat in it. So the Amerindians would basically go and catch meat and then just keep replenishing the pot. And if you heat it up every day, it acts as a natural preservative. And so my mother used to put beef and pork in it, but also pig's trotters because the trotter had a lot of gelatin in it. So
Yeah.
it was nice and shiny and gelatinous. And it's an extraordinary flavor. And actually, I've never met anybody that doesn't like it. It's quite dramatic because it is jet black. And the thought of a pig's trotter for most people turns them right off. But when they taste the flavor of the gravy, it's quite an extraordinary experience because it's, first of all, quite bitter, then sweet, and then quite sort of fragrant with all of the clove and the cinnamon. And then you get this hit of pepper at the back end of it. And it's like, wow. So it's very unexpected. And that is the dish that takes me right back to the bosom of my family.
It sounds amazing, and it doesn't sound odd to me at all. I don't know if you knew this, but I'm actually half South American.
Oh,
My
really?
partner's
Okay.
Brazilian.
Right. Okay.
So
Well, you neighbors, Diana.
my little daughter is a mongrel, basically.
Right.
But in Brazil, they have the famous feijoada,
Hmm.
which is also black and also has pig trotters.
Absolutely.
So this is not a new concept to me. So if I saw that dish, I would quite happily try it.
Well, next time I cook it, I'm going to
Yeah.
bring some in.
Tupperware.
Yes,
Now, living with a
exactly.
Brazilian, with the food being such a big deal, Tupperware is a thing, and they share it amongst their friends. Because as you said, food is like the number one thing for immigrants, I should say.
Yes. Yeah.
Is what they hold on to most, and they'll
Completely.
meet up and they'll all
Yeah.
cook their own food.
Yeah.
And it's more than food. It's a hug.
Yeah.
It's nostalgia.
Yes.
It's familiarity. It's everything.
You can say things with food that you can't bring yourself to verbalize,
Yeah.
I think. And I think it speaks absolute volumes. And, when I was young, it drove me crazy, my parents, because we had this sort of open house on Christmas Day, and all I really wanted was the immediate family
Yeah.
and gifts and, to watch The Wizard of Oz. And meanwhile, the doorbell would keep ringing and all sorts of waifs and strays would wander in. And I was slightly furious about it. And now I think it's absolutely wonderful. And what my mother was so great at was, making sure that there was a dish on the table that reminded everybody of their home. And I think that's a wonderful way of expressing love and sharing things. And it's you don't you it, so it's you don't have to say it. You just say it with a dish, and it speaks volumes. And I think that's what spurred me on to write my cookbook. So you talked about highlights earlier, and I think one of the highlights for me was actually I couldn't believe that I got a cookbook published by a really good publisher. So that was really a great surprise and a real highlight to me, and it was a real love letter to my mother, I think, because I think her way of expressing herself was via food. Um, she came from a generation where women couldn't necessarily express themselves in the way that they wanted to. And I think when you're an immigrant, people have a short attention span when you're in someone else's country. And so I think you are a little bit restricted.
Yeah.
And I think that is food is a great way of expressing oneself.
I completely agree. Completely agree. So how do you think that experience with food shaped your future with food?
I think because I was born in 1966, my father was a dentist, came here because he wanted a great life for his children. We were a massive disappointment. My brother and sister and I did nothing that he wanted us to do. We rebelled in ways that was absolutely alien to him that he couldn't understand. He was born in 1928 in a British colony, and so when my sister was sort of, off at the Marquee Club in Wardour Street, my brother did as well. And me and Earl's Court when it was a ghetto. He couldn't relate to any of it. So he was really disappointed. He wanted us all to be, doctors or dentists or lawyers or whatever. And we didn't follow that path at all. And I can't remember what your question was.
How did your first experiences with food at
Okay.
home
So
shape
basically,
your future with food?
the only thing that I was ever good at was cooking. So when I was about 7, I remember literally looking at I was watching television and there was a recipe for drop scones, which I'd never heard of. And so I just looked at it and I didn't wait to see the recipe, but I went in and I created and it was pretty good. And then also my brother and sister were a bit older than me. On a Saturday, my father would watch racing all day and have his sort of Caribbean friends there and Chinese friends gambling, and all the women would be in the kitchen. My brother and sister were out, and I was stuck in the kitchen, but I kind of liked it. And so I would watch my mother cook and all of my aunts and all of their friends. And I had a really, it was the only thing I enjoyed. I was useless academically at school. I had no interest in school whatsoever. But I really loved cooking and I had a natural aptitude for it. But of course, my father had no interest in me pursuing that. So if I was born later or now, I'm sure my parent would say, "What are you good at? You're good at that," and we'd push you in that direction. But it was completely stifled instead. So
I mean, we are living in a different age
Mm,
where it does seem that, in theory, almost any career path should
yes,
be available to anyone.
yes.
But still, having the endorsement of parents
Mm.
doesn't always come to all families.
No, not at all, and you feel ashamed of your interest, you know, I mean,
Yeah,
I was desperate to take cookery O-level, but I knew I wasn't going to be allowed to do it.
yeah.
And however, mind you, having said that, my father used to love me cooking dishes that he really liked as well, because food was important to him. His mother was a caterer, his aunt was a caterer, and he did not put the ring on my mother's finger until she learned to cook like his mother. My mother grew up with servants and didn't know how to cook, you know. So food was as important to him as it became to me. But then also after my parents died, um, you know, carrying on those recipes and developing those recipes was a way of getting to know my family again.
I like that. That's like a love letter to your mother, you say.
Totally.
Was there a moment when you realized that food was more than just sustenance? That you realized it was going to become something more central to your life?
I think when I left home after my father read the diary and I moved out and all of those things, and I think my mother was very conflicted because she kind of wanted to support her husband, but obviously loved her son too. And she wanted to know where I was living. And, I remember that one day she came over without my father knowing it to where I was living and brought some of my favorite dishes. And I think it was at that point that I recognized how much I'd missed her cooking and what it meant for her to share it. So I think that started on that journey really for me of understanding how important it is. And I will never be a cook that aspires to be a Michelin starred chef at all. That's not what food is about for me.
It's a friend of mine who's got Michelin stars said he was looking forward to the day where he no longer had to cook using tweezers.
Yes. Well, as I said
And
the
I was
word,
like, that pretty much nails it.
it's so funny you should say that because as I said the words Michelin star, I thought I saw a edible flower in a tweezer.
You had a prominent stint as a model agent and in fashion.
Mhm.
You kind of gave us a little inkling as
Yeah,
to how you got into it, but what drew
yeah.
you to that world?
Okay, so well, it was the only thing. So food hadn't become the passion that it became at that point. So fashion really was my massive interest, and I found myself, through Paul Goebel in the squat and all of those things. Um, so Paul gave me a really massive intro into that world, which I knew I was really interested in from looking at the magazines. I was, transfixed by them. And so Paul literally was on a shoot with the best photographers in the world in London. He was a massive, really famous makeup artist. So every shoot he was on was with, John Spinell, Clive Arrowsmith, David Bailey, with the top models in the world. So at 16, I was literally on shoots with David Bailey and Marie Helbin. And then I was working for Bob Payton at a restaurant called Payton Place, and this was 1983. And I saw an advert in the Evening Standard for a booker at a model agency called Synchro. I had heard the word synchro because I used to look at Ritz newspaper and all the magazines at the time, and everything used to be credited. And so I applied for the job. In those days, you would just ring them up, sort of
Yeah.
say, "Hey, hi, I've seen your advert," and they would say yes or no. And I went for the interview, and it was a very small model agency called Synchro, which was on the fifth floor of a building in Russell Street in Covent Garden. And in those days, there were three big agencies: Models One, Lorraine Ashton, and Select. And so Synchro was a sort of poor relation, but it was making noises because the woman who ran it was called Beth Bolt. She was ex-model from Alabama, married to a really great photographer called Richard Dunkley, and she had the best eye in the business to this day. She opened the agency with a loan of £5,000, and which was not a lot of money even in those days to open a business, really. But she would walk around the streets of Covent Garden and she would pick up these girls and think, and she'd see something in them that no one else saw. And they weren't aware of their beauty at this point. And she was a great photographer and she would take pictures of them and launch them overnight in a way that the other agencies weren't doing. So She was amazing. And I went for the interview. They were looking for a secretary to do the invoicing who could speak French. I could do none of the above. And I went into the room, the private office, to have the interview, and she left the door open. And there was a photographer called Koto Belofo, who is now a huge star, and he was their in house testing photographer. She left the door open so he could listen to the interview. And anyway, so I said, thank you very much, left. And apparently he'd said to her, he's the one out of everyone you've interviewed. And so I got offered the job. So the other booker there was furious because she wanted her life to be made easy. And I wasn't going to do that. And it was a really creative time. But, during that time, she would literally in the middle of the day say, right, I'm going scouting. And she came back with people like Naomi Campbell, literally. And so she launched amazing careers. And, Debbie then left, and it was just me and Beth for a while. And we always used to say she'd find them and I'd flog them. And that's what used to happen.
Well, you mentioned Naomi Campbell because I was going to ask you, you've managed people like Naomi Campbell, Liv Tyler, many, right?
hmm
Can you give me a glimpse of what that life was like? What was work life like?
You know what? I was 17 and the girls were averagely about 15. So I wasn't looking at it in the way that I would look at it now. We all just, we were all broke. We all just wanted to get by. This amazing agency that Beth had started really wasn't making much money. And nobody knew that they meant anything. Naomi was special from the day she walked in. There was something about her. She had this sort of this life that sort of cliche trite of, oh yes, a smile that lit up a room, but she really did have it. And she was also a trained dancer because she was at stage school. And the way she moved was so incredible, but also she had a confidence in her that was so vital and so exciting. And in those days, I'm really ashamed to say it, being a mixed race person, but we would actually question having more than one black girl on the books.
Mm.
Well, we've got one. Do you think we should have another? I'm not sure. It was literally like that. Anyway, so her career just sort of skyrocketed, and none of us were really equipped to deal with it. To be perfectly honest with you, it wasn't what London was about. We didn't have the politics that came later in the industry. So in those days, a model would do Vogue one day and Woman's Own the next, and no one worried about it. It was a few years later we understood how damaging all that could be.
And then you went for exclusivity and
Yes, and the politics of, we didn't realize the importance. And I think that was a good thing. So we were just coasting it and having a great time, really.
now the other way around. I asked you about your early experiences with food shape your future with food. Um, do you feel your experience with fashion influenced the way you now present and travel food and
I don't know, really. I mean, I still work in fashion. That's still the day job. But I now represent hairdressers, makeup artists, photographers, and stylists. So it's sort of slightly removed. I think I got to the point where I was feeling that I was getting too old to represent models. And Jerry Hall was the last model I worked with when she decided to get married to Rupert Murdoch. And I thought, well, maybe it's time to call it quits. And segued into that. So actually, I don't think so. I don't think fashion has had any influence in how I present foods or how I present my, various shows that I do. It's something that's more personal to me and a bit removed, actually, and something that's, um, I guess, more about me, I suppose,
more intimate?
and more intimate to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, here's I've got to be delicate with this subject. I'm going to bring up because I discovered it and I had no idea about this, but I hope you're okay with me asking.
Absolutely, I think I know what's coming.
Yeah. So the Marchioness
Yeah.
disaster, you were present.
Yes.
How did that event change you personally and professionally?
I can't. Well, it changed me personally and professionally in very negative ways. Actually, I think
Really?
it took in many ways, yes. In other ways, maybe not. So I think it was, the mid '80s were a difficult time, particularly growing up as part of the LGBT community, which was absolutely. I mean, the death and destruction, it was just really difficult. And anyway, at the same time, my career was really going pretty well, and I was probably quite young and arrogant with it. And I just set up a photographer's agency with my best friend, who was called Antonio. And the birthday party on the Marchioness was booked for him for his 26th birthday. And so at that point, I just set up this agency. I represented about 12 photographers, had 5 members of staff. And so I sort of was quite responsible for organizing most of the party. So, I'd organize the DJ, printed the invitations, the catering, all of those things. And sadly, all of our staff died. Antonio and his brother died. And so it kind of felt like the people I hadn't lost to AIDS, I then lost that night. And so things changed literally overnight. So from sort of, it was a contrasting life, because on one hand, we were sort of living through this terrible pandemic, where loss was a massive part of life. And the gay scene was really tricky, because you would sort of literally suddenly remember somebody thinking, well, where's so and so? I haven't seen him for a while. And then you'd hear a story said, well, he thought he had flu on Thursday and had died on the Sunday. And there was a lot of people, families turning their backs on people. And it was very tricky, but it was all really sad. But actually, there was a great camaraderie at that period as well. And then, so to have the people that were left sort of taken away as well was really, really awful. And literally, life just came to a grinding halt overnight. So I'd survived it. And then, as the days ticked by, I was in hospital for a week or so. And then day by day, waiting to find out who was found and who wasn't. And then the realization that I then had to shut everything down, and sort of became bankrupt. And then, so literally overnight, my earnings had, the business had to be closed. My earnings were gone, and I had to move back home. And it had a very detrimental effect to me, obviously. I became, I put on about 6 stone, what now felt like overnight. And I was just confused and conflicted for the longest time. And I've always been able to sort of put on quite a confident front, because that came with my job. Being an agent is all about having a poker face, I guess. And so I was sort of hiding my emotions and sort of eating my way through it. Had a lot of unhealthy addictions because of needing something and not knowing what that was. And all of us survivors have sort of suffered in that way. And it's taken years to sort of come to terms with, actually, and to sort of not be restricted by it. And also, we really felt that we were I think the vibe was that somehow we deserved it. It was sort of Armageddon. It was Thatcher's Ark. It was
Oh
like,
no.
we'd gone through lots of other disasters. There was the Brugger, there was Hillsborough, and suddenly it was whether a bit of sort of, druggy, gay, London centric, rich Chelseaites who, okay, yeah, it's sad, but maybe they kind of deserved it. It was how we all still feel. And I think that was something that will always feel unfair to me, because ultimately, any party in any country, in any town, has a combination of people. Yes, Antonio had a privileged life, but who cares? He died at 26. His brother died. Um, you know, not all my staff were from various backgrounds, but it shouldn't matter. 51 people died on the Thames, and no one really cared about it, apart from people that were directly involved. So it was, and the press, I think, gave us a real hammering, and I think it's a forgotten disaster that no one really knows about, and no one cares about. Um, and as our survivors were really shy about a lot of things, because we had to be respectful to people's parents. I mean, imagine in the middle of the night, the police knock on the door and say, "Well, your kids died." And we didn't want them to feel that they were involved in something that the parents wouldn't have been pleased about. And so that was all the stigma of that time.
I mean, to be honest, it's taking me aback what you're saying, because it sounded like you had to be a trapeze artist to manage surviving, to manage, I'm sure, feelings of guilt,
Yeah.
to manage loss, and then furthermore to have nowhere to turn,
Yeah.
no space of comfort. That sounds pretty fucking bleak.
It wasn't fun. Let me tell you, it wasn't fun. And now we talk about mental health. Now we accept it. And in the 80s, we just really didn't at all. So I would not. I did not ask for help. I didn't expect to. I didn't expect help to be given.
But did you even know? You might not realize you needed help.
No, I didn't realize I needed help. It's and I don't think you ever do until and until you have time to reflect on it and you look in your actions and think, oh my God, what was I thinking? What was I doing? So now I look back and I think, my God, I'm amazed that I actually got through it at all. I really do. Yeah, so it's a funny thing because it's so part of me and so like it never happened at the same time. And so it feels like yesterday and like a million years ago. But I think grief is a really, subjective, difficult thing. And I think grief is something that changes you and you learn to sort of wear it and you learn to be silent about it. And, there is every single time I look at the River Thames, I think of things I'd rather not think about. Crossing a bridge will never be comfortable for me.
Yeah.
But as I say, with grief, you learn to suppress it and you learn not to, no one's interested in other people's stuff.
Let me ask you, did it shift your sense of purpose?
What it did was it made me compassionate. It stifled my drive and my ambition because I was so aware of. I am conflicted to this day about people with great ambition and drive and people who make it. And I look at sort of some of my, like, okay, let's just take presenters or whatever. I know that I will never have that drive and foresight to be successful at anything, particularly, and that's how you measure success, right? So I'm talking about materially and to sort of be at the top of your tree. So, I mean, I could mention a whole load of presenters to you right now who I know have that determination and that grit and they just are really driven and really want to succeed. I think prior to the Marchioness, I had a bit more of that. I never had a lot of that because I never had that sort of confidence. But it certainly, it certainly made me lose what confidence I had. But I also wanted to be a more compassionate, understanding person. And I don't know if you can have all of those trappings without making some kind of Faustian pact. And it's like my ambitions become less and less. I thought by the time the age I'm at now, I'd have Chateau Pang or, at least a pied de terre in somewhere grotty and own a house outright. And I will have none of it, but that's okay. I'm, really happy about that because I think the sacrifice you have to make to be really successful is not the person I want to be. And I think so the Marchioness, to answer the question, I think sort of put an end to all of that with me, and it's sort of trying to find that middle ground and balance again it has taken a long time, and people had an expectation of me and what they thought I could deliver, and it certainly shook that.
When I was looking at some of your train videos, something came to mind. So one of the real highlights that I have with my partner, we love to watch food programs.
Right.
Especially, this is so cheesy, I know. We watch Brazilian MasterChef. And it's not cheesy because it's MasterChef. It's cheesy because it's Brazilian MasterChef. Right. And it's just, everything is so over the top and dramatic. And,
right.
But we love it. And there's this, one of the presenters, she's absolutely gorgeous. And I always see her there. And she goes in to take this bite of food. And when I was watching you eating it, it made me think, I was like, is there a trick to eating food and looking good on camera? Because I would be terrified of crumbs in my beard, sauce down my chin.
I'm going to be honest, it takes practice, and particularly on trains, because I would jolt it like this. So, okay, let's just talk about the train thing, because I had no interest in trains whatsoever. And so it wasn't like an ambition of mine to go and make a series on trains. So I'd written the cookbook, which was well received, and Food Network then approached me about doing a show to accompany the cookbook. So we made the show in the Caribbean. I made a lot of mistakes with it. I don't like it. I can't, I've never been good at watching myself. I watched the first episode of Britain's Next Top Model. I did 3 series of it. I never watched one episode ever again because I was so mortified by it. And then with the Caribbean, somebody in the commissioning team said, "Oh, I see you wearing brightly colored, like Lacoste shirts." Now, look at me. I was much fatter in those days, and but still had these skinny arms or whatever. And plus, those Lacoste t-shirts are really thick and hot. Anyway, so I went and bought 24 of them, and in every color under the rainbow, and it was a huge mistake. Then the director, who was, no criticism quite pasty, said, "I don't want you wearing white because you will look pasty." And I felt like saying, "Well, actually, I'm olive skin. I'm going to tan in about 10 seconds flat. So I won't," but I wasn't going to argue. And what I should have been in is sort of, floaty linen or whatever. So the wardrobe was a mistake. Then the director said to me, "The channel like Big and Camp." I'm like, "Well, you've got Big and Camp. How?" So, and every time I was doing something, he'd say, "Go bigger, go bigger." And I'm like, so it didn't feel authentic. So I was it wasn't as good as it should have been, and it was my dream, and it was kind of, my opportunity, and I was just quite crushed by it for a while. But anyway, I suppressed it. And it came out, and it was just like, whatever. And then Food Network bought Travel Channel. And so the boss said to me, "Okay, we want to do a series on trains. We've got a producer who's brought Belmont into it. And how do you feel about it?" So I'm like, "Yeah, great." Um, really thinking, "Oh God, trains, am I gonna," and so it was really an interesting thing because I had no affection for trains, no interest in trains, but I grew to love them. It was really tricky because I was so big at the time, and I'm 6'2" and a bit. And however you look at it, a bed on a train is a shelf. And, some people get lulled to sleep by the rocking motion, and it would lull me awake and I would never sleep. And then I'd have to eat about 5 3-course meals a day and spend all day because on a train, because it's, people have spent their life savings going on the Orient Express. So you couldn't disrupt their experience of it. And there's me sort of sitting, eating and eating and eating with not with only like one camera from different angles. So I'd have to eat the whole thing and sit there looking sort of dainty, trying not to drop it, as you said, and trying to look really like thrilled about it. And each episode we'd have to do about 5 different stories. Sorry, 3 different stories. But we'd have to film about 5 or 6 of them in case some of them didn't work. So I would literally visibly get bigger by the end of each episode. And to answer the question, it's really tricky. On a train, eating soup, blah, blah, blah. One, looking hungry, looking like, when you think, "Oh, I can't bear to eat anything else, just let me get into I open a window and fart." It's, 'cause you're so overfull and then not sleeping. But it was an amazing experience. I saw the world in a way that I would never be able to afford to do. I crossed Canada. I went on the Orient Express a lot of times through the Alps. I crossed Australia. It was kind of amazing,
It sounds amazing.
and I miss it now.
I was going to say, do you know what? It reminds me. I think you'll relate to this. I think there's a void in TV now ever since his departure.
Mm.
Um,
Oh, I know who
Anthony
you get.
Bourdain.
Yes,
And I really got that vibe.
yeah.
I was like, there's no one doing that now.
You know what? I all of it was a little bit about before its time. Some of it was good, some of it really wasn't. Machu Picchu, I was I was thrilled. It was my lifetime ambition to go there, and I really suffered from altitude sickness. I had the worst migraines ever.
Yeah.
They kept on giving me the coca leaf to chew. So again, I wasn't sleeping, and I had to sit like, there are all these 90-year-olds hurtling up the mountains, and I'm there with oxygen, thinking, "Oh God, I want to die." But yes, you are right. That is I think he is really missed, and his shows were beautiful. But they had about 10 cameramen and a lot of money.
Yeah.
Ours was so low budget. There was sort of me and one other. But still amazing that I did it, So
Let me ask you about the cookbook. I think you kind of answered this earlier on, as to what the central message you wanted to convey with the book. I'm guessing, just from this dialogue we're having now, it wasn't about the recipes per se.
No. Well, see, the recipes, again, there's a couple of elements here. So one, I really wanted to write a book on Guyanese food because I find Guyanese food very interesting. I think the history of it's very interesting. And I think considering we are in England that created indenture, I don't think most people know what that means. I think, after slavery was abolished, the British created indentured labour, which is consensual slavery, let's face it. And Guyana, particularly, and a lot of Caribbean, was populated by indentured labourers from India, China, and Portugal. Well, Madeira mainly.
Mm-hmm.
And I have all of those nationalities in me. So my father was 3/4 Chinese and 1/4 Indian. My mother's mother was a white Bayesian who was Scottish and Portuguese. And her father was part Amerindian and part Bayesian. So I really, truly am the face of the Commonwealth, actually, after the abolition of slavery. And so therefore the food reflects all of those nationalities more than in a lot of the Caribbean islands. So that was really what I wanted to do. And in many ways I achieved it. There were a lot of mistakes with it because I rushed the book. When somebody says jump, you got to say how high. Now I would say no, I won't be ready in 3 months, which is what happened. And it is essential that writing a cookbook costs you a lot of money, let me tell you, because you have to try every recipe about 28 times. Something you've cooked all your life suddenly becomes something different and suddenly doesn't taste the same and doesn't have the same effect. And you've got to be exact, and that takes time. Also, the book is part memoir. There's a lot of text in it. And in many ways, I'd wish I'd kept that for another book.
Yeah.
But the fact is, I wasn't thinking, okay, so I work with James Martin a lot, who I think has published 38 cookbooks. That was never my intention. I wanted to just do the one. And I am proud of it. You know, whether it found a market doesn't really matter. It's an archive of my family recipes and an archive of family photos and our family history, which is niche. But people that I don't know. I presume the reviews are genuine, and I think people either embraced it or they didn't. But the fact is, nowadays, I wouldn't get a Caribbean cookbook commissioned, which is a whole other story.
Yeah. Of that cookbook, if we were here cooking a meal right now, a beginner-friendly one, can you pick one out and share it with us?
All of them are pretty easy.
Oh, yeah?
But, I do like I think there's a recipe in there which everybody who's tasted it just loves it, and it's a beef and pork curry.
Nice.
So my mother accidentally bought pork instead of beef. So, because she wanted 2 packets. And you know what it's like? I do it all the time too, surreptitiously. I pick up something, I don't want it anymore, just shove it somewhere as long as it's in the fridge. And that's clearly what happened. So she came home with beef and pork and was furious about it, but thought, I'm not going to waste it. And so my mother would curry anything.
Yeah.
Right. And so she cooked it together and it is absolutely delicious. And there isn't one man on earth that doesn't like that recipe. And so, girls, it's a way to a man's heart. Trust me, it's quite simple. And a Caribbean curry and a Guyanese curry is a lot less refined than an Indian one. It doesn't have those layers of flavors.
Are they spicy?
They're very spicy.
Yeah.
However, it doesn't have, cardamom. It doesn't have cumin seeds or mustard seeds and all of those things. It's pretty simple and basic. Bit like me, and the flavor is great. So that is a really great recipe. My jerk recipe, I think, is really, really nice as well, but I wouldn't I? And there's a Creole prawn dish, which I think is really great, and that always goes down very well.
Look, I love food from that part of the world, and Brazilian food, I didn't realize until being essentially living with a Brazilian, having a child with one, and getting to know the culture in depth, how broad the food is there.
Yes, well, exactly.
Because it's a country that goes all the way from the equator to the Iguazu Falls.
Absolutely.
In fact, if I'm not wrong, anyone here can Google this or correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in terms of landmass, it's actually bigger than the USA. What makes the USA bigger is Alaska.
Right.
So it's bigger than mainland
Right.
USA.
There is a lot of it, absolutely.
And you've got all of the different regions,
Yeah.
different cultures,
Yeah.
different tribes. You've got the areas which have more African descent from the slave colonies that were brought over. You've got areas which have more the native Indian aspects. Then you go down the south, you've got the Germans,
Right.
the German colonies that have down there as well. It's so varied, and some of the food coming out of there and ingredients that we don't use here in England.
Absolutely.
You were talking about cassava. I love cassava. In fact, I had cassava for lunch today.
You know, where the problem lies is that, you know, it's back to the tweezer thing, isn't it? You know, there's this emphasis on, you know, on presentation, whereas my emphasis will always be about
flavor, as it should be.
You know, I'm not really that bothered about how it looks, and so you know, there's a lot of brown food going on, but also I think because my book was very cross-cultural, nobody quite understood why there was the Chinese recipes in there.
Which train journey stood out for you most?
Okay, I think, well, I still amazed that I crossed Australia. And what it was a big surprise to me, Australia, because it was at moments of breathtaking beauty and moments of, oh my God, I'm in the middle of absolute nowhere and I'm going to get killed and this train's going to break down and there is nothing and no one. So I thought that was really something that always, you know, surprises me.
How long did that take?
4 days.
Wow.
And, you know, in a pretty ugly train, but it was really, it was a hilarious journey. It really was. And I just can't believe that I did it. And it was kind of great though, because every time the train stopped, different chefs and different wine merchants would come on. So it was a massive piss up and, you know, amazing local food. And Australians have such a great spirit to them. They're so positive and so much fun. And, you know, I found had a great sense of humor. Crossing Canada, again, I went from Vancouver to I can't remember where we ended up, but that took 4 days as well, and that's a magnificently beautiful country as well.
I've never been to Canada or Australia, and I'd love to visit both.
Yeah,
of them.
they're pretty epic, actually.
They're both countries high on my list.
Yeah, you feel quite insignificant because they're so immense.
Yeah.
From a luxury point of view, the, you know, Venice Simple and Orient Express will always be very special. However, there's no ensuite. You can't open, no air conditioning.
Yeah.
So if you do it in the summer, you are stifling and you have to walk down a corridor to go for a wee.
Yeah.
And you can't open a window because it's freezing and you get these terrible fumes. So, but sitting in the Lalique dining room, you really feel like you're in, you know, Murder on the Orient Express and you're in your black tie and it's kind of great.
In terms of everyday comfort, which was the best train then?
Everyday comfort.
Yeah.
I would say the Eastern Oriental, which I did a couple of times. So I went from Singapore to Bangkok, or you can do it the other way around and you go through Malaysia, and that's kind of amazing. But it is air conditioned. You do have an ensuite, and it's really luxurious, and the food is amazing on it. So I think that one, probably from absolute comfort point of view, is great.
These sound
mind you,
epic.
the Royal Scotsman is great too. Because you sleep very well on it because it sort of docks in a station every night, and so there's none of that. And there's a, you know, it's communal dining, so you have to talk to people, which is a good thing. And there's nice entertainment. You do real dancing and your kilt and all of those things.
Can you tell me what the most underrated Caribbean ingredient is?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Well, how about one that people don't know about? We can try that.
Well, I will always use a Caribbean curry powder as opposed to an Indian one.
The difference being?
Color. And I think it's less fragrant and it's that's kind of spicier in a purer way, if that makes sense. And I find them more digestible.
that helps.
Mm-hmm.
If you had to pick one snack for a 6-hour train journey, what would you choose?
Plantain chips.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Or chana. A
Yeah.
nice Trinidadian crunchy fried chickpea with lots of salt and lots
Yeah.
of hot pepper. I think
Fried
those
chickpeas.
two things on each side of the mouth simultaneously.
The Spanish do those really nice fried chickpeas. Have you had the Spanish ones?
Yeah, but they're the bigger
Yeah.
ones, right? I like the really the little
Yeah.
lentily ones are great.
What's your dinner party soundtrack? What would be your go-to song? Or
Okay.
band or theme?
Oh God, now you're putting me on the spot, aren't you? I like music that doesn't impose. So I don't want supermarket, like lift elevator music.
Yeah.
But I think music does create a mood.
Yeah, it does,
So
absolutely.
like a nice little sort of gentle jazz, I think is nice, and bit of instrumental sax. Or I do love 70s reggae.
Hey, wow. Well, you'd like our playlist. Our playlist is all basically Brazilian and reggae.
There you go. I'm in.
So if you could lead the audience with one recipe, what would you leave it with?
Garlic pork.
Nice.
So again, that's the other thing that we have on Christmas Day in Guyana, which is one of their other national dishes, which derives from Portugal. But basically, I love pork, and so it's cuts of pork, so big chunks of shoulder and belly. You have to do quite big chunks, cut by big chunks. Make sure there's a lot of fat running through it, and you pickle it in white vinegar. Lots of garlic, and when I say lots, I'm talking, a several heads of garlic, a lot of thyme. Caribbean thyme is different to English thyme. It's not as sort of citrus, and the dry thyme is a lot earthier. You put a lot of that in it and a lot of hot pepper, and you steep it. You wash the pork in lime first of all, then steep it in the vinegar with salt and pepper, the hot peppers, the thyme, the enormous amount of garlic. Leave it there for a couple of weeks. Drain it, and
For a couple of
then
weeks.
couple of weeks.
Wow.
And then you drain it and fry it, and then dry it out in the oven. But the flavor is so incredible, and it's melt in the mouth because it's been pickling in the vinegar. And the reason you have to do big chunks is because it will shrink as a result. But so you've got that, the hit of thyme and the hot peppers as well, and this amazing garlic flavor. So when I left home, I remember I used to come home at Christmas and pretend I still lived at home with the Chinese relatives. And when my mother would cook this, she would only cook it once a year, as most people do, because of the smell. And as I was coming round the corner from the tube, I got the whiff of it. And so you really have to, open a lot of windows, burn a lot of candles,
Yeah.
but it is quite sublime. And so that is, it's really worth doing, and it's really spectacular.
I think I'm going to get a collection of Tupperware and just leave them with
Yeah.
you. And then whenever you're just walking past, just, quickly drop them. If I'm not here, my staff will take them. All good.
Well, I'll be delighted to do that because most people don't eat anymore. They're all a manjol.
Nah, I love all this stuff. What's next for you? Is there a dream project you haven't done?
No. So what? Do you know something? No. I mean, I wish a lot of my projects had been better. And I wish I'd been better, and I wish the team had been better. But now I have a nice balance. I like my day job. I like my evening job. I love taking pictures. That's something that I never thought I would do for a living, but it's becoming a big thing, and I really do enjoy that. So I work with James Martin. That I really love him. He's a great guy. He's supportive of me. I do all my drink stuff on Alan Titchmarsh. I'm doing Ainsley's Christmas show, which I would enjoy because he's an old mate as well. So there's no risk there. And then I work a lot in Greece, which is weird. I've just done a really beautiful short films for the Attica region for promoting their wines.
Okay.
And it was lovely. It's a really great crew. They film beautifully. We all get on. And there's not a lot at stake, and not a lot of people will see it. I do live in fear of doing something, having a good offer again, and then it all going badly.
Why would that be?
Well, because you just don't know. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, and I just don't really fancy it. So when I was on like Britain's Next Top Model, it was a big brand, and I didn't really understand how big the brand was, and I hated people recognizing me and talking to me about it the whole time. And yeah, you get freebies and a good table at the Ivy, but who cares, you know?
Yeah.
So actually, I like the process of making TV and I like doing it in a small way.
Yeah.
So actually, I think the balance is quite nice. But yeah, I'd love to remake the Caribbean show, but that'll never happen. I'd like to do another couple of train journeys again, and I'd like to be better at them.
Yeah.
But actually, my balance is quite good.
That's good to hear. That's really, really good. And finally, how can people follow you or support you or see your work? I mean, do you want to name drop some hashtags or?
Well, I mean, I'm on Instagram,
Yeah.
you know, which I've become addicted to, like
Yeah.
everybody else. It's like frightens me how much time I spend.
It's really important.
Oh God, I know, but I get these, you know, updates of, oh, you've been on the phone 4 hours
I'll turn them off.
average per day, and
Turn
it's
them
just
off.
like, oh, what am I doing with my life? So on Facebook, which no one seems to use anymore. So you know, Instagram is at Mr. Jonathan Phang. My photography bit is at Jonathan Phang Photography, and I do bits and bobs on it. But yeah, I mean, if you want to see me embarrassing myself, there's lots of clips on YouTube. But not that I'm looking at them.
I had to watch Fairview.
Yeah.
Because it's fun. It's definitely fun. Jonathan, thank you so much for being part. Thank you. I really enjoyed this. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been really fun.
If you like this episode, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel.